Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining the Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum for our History at Home series. My name is Nell Burkett. I'm the curator at the museum. Through the History at Home series, we aim to bring a diverse array of voices to dig into history from different perspectives. The museum would like to start this evening by giving a land acknowledgement. The museum recognizes that we are guests here on this land, historically Ute territory. We acknowledge that mining and ranching community that established itself at the end of the 1800s was at the expense of the Uncompahgre Ute and the Tabawatch Ute, who were forcibly removed from this area due to the Bruneau Treaty and the manipulation that followed. We hope that you will take time to visit our neighbor, the Ute Museum, located in Montrose, Colorado, with exhibits developed in partnership with the Ute Tribes by History Colorado, our state historic society. While we could never do this history justice, we do include information about Paleo Indians of the Gunnison Valley, the Ute people, the Bruneau Treaty, and the Los Pinos Indian Agency in our exhibits. The Crested View Mountain Heritage Museum knows that we have a great responsibility in representing many stories from our history, good and bad, and we continue to listen to those voices when they are ready to share. This program, as always, is being recorded and can be found at CrestedButteMuseum.com, along with many other programs that we've done so far. We also hope that you will consider supporting the museum and supporting this program by becoming a member or making a donation. Again, you can go to CrestedButteMuseum.com to make that happen. Also, update, remember we are starting Dwayne Vandenbush's History of the Crested View area on January 28th. It'll be Thursdays at 7 p.m. Registration is live, so you can find that also on our website. So be sure to hop on there and get registered for the class. It's also free. Finally, we're in the middle of our holiday history raffle. The raffle features a week stay in, I always butcher this, Kailua Kona, Hawaii, a week stay in Molokai, Hawaii, a custom pair of romp skis, a $500 cash prize, a $100 Crested View personal chef's dinner, a $100 speckled goose dinner, and a museum membership package. Tickets are $5.50 for one or $26 for six and can be purchased through December 30th. Our raffle drawing will take place online December 30th at 5:30 p.m. Next week, we do not have a History at Home because it is Christmas Eve. We will resume our History at Home on January 7th with photographer Sandra Kortner, photographer and author. Tonight, I am thrilled to welcome Kim Reichhelm. Reichhelm is a pioneer in the ski industry. She was a member of the U.S. ski team and NCAA All American for the University of Colorado, a professional ski racer and two-time World Extreme champion. Skiing Magazine named Reichhelm as one of the most influential skiers of all time in 2017. And tonight she joins us to talk about Crested Butte's Extreme Skiing Championships, a ground-breaking competition and event she spearheaded beginning in 1992. So, Kim, to kick it off, how did you come to Crested Butte?
I ski raced for the University of Colorado. So that was my opportunity to get out of Vermont into Colorado. And I do remember the very first time driving into Crested Butte as a freshman, thinking it was the most beautiful valley I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, I still have pictures of it and photo albums of that scene of driving into Crested Butte Valley. It was just took my breath away. And then I didn't really go back a lot for ski races through college, but then afterwards I had started Women's Ski Adventures. And I had run one season of Women's Ski Adventures and I was pitching the program, and Andy Klerman, who at the time was editor of Skiing Magazine, said, I'll sponsor you. I'll give you advertising. And K2 came in and he said, I think you should go to Crested Butte. He said, they're very, very forward thinking. And I think you would get along really well. And I suggest you take your program as one of your stops for Women's Ski Adventures to go to Crested Butte. So I did. And that was in 1990.
1990. So what was Crested Butte like in 1990 when you came?
It was just smaller. It didn't have as much of the development, the Callaways and the Waltons owned resort, and everything was pretty simple. And it was I haven't been there in a long time. I'm sure it's changed quite a bit since I've been there, but its essence is probably very much the same. I know that this summer all resort towns really had a tough time with the general attitude of the locals, but before that, Crested Butte, I always say Crested Butte is all the hippies that lived in Aspen got run out of town by the politics and the big wigs and the bullshit, and they went to Telluride. And then the same thing happened in Telluride, and they left Telluride and they went to Crested Butte and they got on the town council. And some of those people are still in Crested Butte, but the no trophy home ordinances and the 15 miles an hour and the lack of franchises and, you know, the fact that everybody, it seemed to me when I lived in Crested Butte that everybody was overqualified for their jobs and was truly there because they loved the community. And I'm sure that that still exists. And that's, you know, that's what I've loved about it immediately. It was a very authentic ski town, and it still is. You might have to probably dig a little deeper to find it, but you guys are all still there.
So who were some of the first folks that you ran into when you came to Crested View?
You know, John Norton was pretty much the man. So, you know, you always try to go to the top right away. Gina Croft was incredible in helping me at that time. There, Bob Gillen was the marketing director. Everybody was very helpful because I had Andy Klerman at Skiing Magazine and K2, and I was utilizing the people that I knew. And, you know, it's a long time ago, and people take care of people. And Crested Butte immediately embraced women's ski adventures. Actually, after my first season, 1990, they said, we want you to come back next year. We'll give you a season pass. We'll pay for your accommodations. And we want you to run 3 of these camps in a row during the month of February.
Wow.
So, so they brought me back. And then obviously after that year, I actually was living in Tahoe the rest of the time. It was a terrible snow year. I ended up packing up all my stuff, you know, making Crested Butte in 1993 my full-time home. But they just were so gracious and helpful and passionate. And John Norton was a little bit of a wacko. You know, he was just really incredibly smart and loved to party and just, you know, it was full of energy and positive vibes. But it was, you know, it was just a fresher time where you didn't have to be so careful about what you said. I mean, the Waltons and the Callaways who owned Crested Butte were, you know, sort of shooting from the seat of their pants as well. But, you know, probably didn't, you know, how long have you been in Crested Butte?
Only about 10 years. Not
so
long enough.
Well, I did 15 years, and I'm really thankful for them. I loved every single one of them and have still great friends. I called 2 of them today because I wanted to do some checking on some names of people that were involved in the Extreme Skiing Championships. And it's just been so long. So I called Gina Croft and Frank Coffey, and they both answered the phones.
All right.
And, I got some names, so I was stoked about that. But those are the people. They're still my friends. We still are connected in a pretty deep way from the experiences that we all had at Crested Butte during that heyday of the Extreme Skiing Championships and the turnover before you know, it became pretty commercial, I think. I don't know. How is the contest now in Crested Butte? Is it still kegs of beer and the town throwing a big party on the side of the hill, or is it?
Well, a couple of years ago, it did get a little notorious as somebody, I'm not exactly sure what happened, but one of the competitors ended up not making it, I think, to the last round, or I'm not entirely sure why he decided this, but he got to the top of the run, stripped down naked, and then took the rest of the run that way. And there were some good pictures in the newspaper from that. So I think it's still a little bit wild. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So could you tell me a little bit more about the women's ski adventures and how it sounds like that's kind of what brought you here in the first place? Is that correct?
It is, definitely. Women's Ski Adventures was a program that I sort of created through a number of years and experiences with just women, being around women, intimidating situations, watching how women learn differently, learning just in small ski situations where if I was just running an hour clinic as a promotion for Anheuser-Busch or something, how the women responded differently if there weren't guys around. You know, if the guys were there, they would ask all the questions and they would answer for her, and she would be like, I don't know, you know, and when I eliminated the guys and just brought in the women, they responded more positively. They were more calm. They learned more. They had more fun. I taught windsurfing 101, and I learned very quickly how women learned entirely different than the men, and how the guys were in such a rush and just wanted to get on that windsurfer and pull the sail out of the water and sail across the bay happily ever after, and they wouldn't pay any attention to the instruction. And the women listened to everything I said. So this is like, I'm a freshman in college. I come home for summer. I get a job teaching windsurfing 101. And this is in like, whatever, 79, 80. And I was shocked every single time. The women learned faster than the guys, only because they were intimidated. They stopped and listened. They asked questions, and they understood the physics of how a windsurfer works. And the guys are like, give me a break. It can't be that hard. Let me get on that thing. Get out of my way. And so I took a lot of experiences being around women in skiing and other sports, and just really felt that there's so many things about the sport of skiing that I loved and was being bypassed because it was being taught the wrong way, that the environment was wrong. And so I just, slowly devised what's the ultimate ski experience for a woman? What would I want? Everything perfect, just every situation where a woman could say, I don't want to do that, or it's too cold, or I don't want to drive, or that, whatever the problem is, I fix it so that she wants to go skiing and she gets to the point where she really appreciates the sport and is having fun doing the sport. And then, it just, that was my goal, to eliminate all the hassles. And I was really successful at it. I never thought, it was just sort of a dream thing. My dad was like, you got to stop dreaming and come home and get a real job. And the fact that it's, been 30 plus years and I'm still doing it is pretty amazing, but it's very rewarding. Dropping my notes on the floor.
That's all right. I feel like that attitude really fits into Crested Butte very well of, who's to say what a real job is, right? To come out here and do something you enjoy.
Yeah. I once told my dad, when he said you need to come home and get a real job, I said, that's not what I want out of life. And he said, what do you want out of life? And I said, well, I want to have fun. And my dad said, Kimberly, life's not about having fun. And I'm like, I think maybe it could be. I'm going to try.
Well, I think you've proven that it is that way.
I have, and he's proud of me now. He's like, all right, I was wrong. Good job. Actually, when Crested Butte paid me to be ski ambassador, it was a great contract, and it lasted 4 years, and it really gave me a big boost in my career and allowed me to buy my house in Crested Butte. And that my dad went, really? They're paying you just to ski around with people? Like, that's all you have to do? And I'm like, uh-huh.
I was going to ask you that.
Okay.
What does being a ski ambassador mean?
Well, most ski resorts have it. I mean, isn't Wendy Fisher sort of the ski ambassador of Crested Butte? Or don't you have people that are the best skiers on the mountain that are spokespeople that, are involved in the community and they're the representatives? And a ski ambassador is the person that skis with the VIPs, the media. They're the spokesperson for the resort. And I mean, Scott Schmidt, ski ambassador for whatever that Yellowstone club. Oh, hey, Chris, my phone's ringing, sorry.
Okay.
And my boyfriend's watching the football game.
This is our Zoom life, right? This is reality, yeah.
All right, sorry about that.
Oh, good. All right.
The Raiders are coming back, though, so.
Okay. For all those sports fans out there, that's the update.
Yeah.
So let's get into the Extreme Skiing Championships. How did these begin to culminate and turn into, where did the idea come from? How did this all get started?
Okay, I can tell you exactly the whole story.
Okay.
So extreme skiing, the word extreme was actually the first time the word extreme and any sport that I know of, it was skiing, and it was Greg Stump, who did so in a movie called The Blizzard of Oz. He put extreme and skiing together. And that's an iconic movie for anybody that knows anything about the beginning of the extreme ski movement. From there, he made another film called License to Thrill, which I was in. And this is in the late 80s. Yeah, late 80s. So because I was in License to Thrill, I got a phone call or a message from a guy that said his name was Mike Kozad, and he had a helicopter and a lodge in Alaska, and he and his girlfriend are going to run a contest, and they're going to call it the World Extreme Skiing Championships, and would I like to come up and be a competitor? And the entry fee was $500 and included accommodations at somebody's house, most of our meals, and 3 days of helicopter skiing to be in the contest. I'm like, I'm in. Yeah, this sounds incredible. Why would you say no to that? And it ended up kind of being like a festival. There was, I think, 32 people invited or that showed up. I don't know really how many were invited, but the idea was Mike Kozad and his girlfriend, Shannon Loveland, owned a place called the Sana Lodge. And it's on Thompson Pass, where now most of the heli operations are in that area outside of Valdez. And they had this crazy friend, Chet, who was a Vietnam heli pilot, and he was flying all over the place, and they're flying all over the place, and they're like, oh my God, if the world knew how freaking cool it is here, they'd all come here. This is the coolest place to ski in the whole wide world. And the weather's great, and the Alaska snowpack is incredible, and you can ski these spines, and there's crevasses and bears, and it's so they create this contest, and they invite the best skiers in the country they can get to go up there. And they invite Glenn Plake and Mike Hattrip and a couple of journalists from like the Woodbury brothers or something from Anchorage to be judges. We all got to decide what we wanted to be judged on. Like, we had a meeting and we discussed what is the criteria that you as athletes want to be judged on. We had a meeting and talked about it. My category was fluidity. I was like, it's important to me that a great ski run top to bottom is fluid, and it's still a category and the judging criteria. And we had 3 days of unbelievable heli skiing, a little bit of controversy. It was scary. I was scared to death. I was so out of my league. I'd never worn a beacon. I'd never been in a helicopter. I just pretty much just started free skiing. I was so green. And it was terrifying. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end when I got to Valdez, and it did not go back down until I left. And that went on for years. I continued to go to Valdez for the Worlds every spring, the first week in April, from that point until, probably 8 years, 9 years. It was amazing. So now we want to know how did Crested Butte come into this?
Yeah. Well, first, before you do, what was the first year of that World?
1991.
Okay.
Okay, so I go to Crested Butte and I say, I've been invited to compete in this contest. Can you help me raise some money to go? Gina Croft was like, sure, we can do that. She goes to Aloe Up. Aloe Up gives me $500. And I got Anheuser-Busch to help pay for me because I had a relationship with Anheuser-Busch through some other work I'd done in broadcasting. And I fly up to Alaska, and I have the most experience of my life. Now, I was on the U.S. ski team. I've traveled all over the world. I went to Ski Academy. I grew up in Vermont. I've 20 years of ski racing. And I just was so blown away by how much fun it was and what a cool place it was, and how what a great experience, the people that I met and the connections, the Alaskans. And it wasn't just a bunch of A-teamers. It was some A-teamers and some locals and some friends of friends. And, we had no helmets. There were, and a big part of this story is the safety team. The first year in Alaska was the National Ski Patrol. And these guys had no right being on the hills we were skiing down. Like, at one point, one of the National Ski Patrol guys started skiing down, and it rolls over so steep that he freaked out and couldn't get to the bottom. And Doug Coombs, had to traverse out on this rock ledge, throw a rope to him, have him tie himself up to his harness, and he stayed there tied to the rope for 2 hours while we finished the contest.
Wow. So you guys were rescuing the ski patrol, who should be ready to rescue you.
Yeah. And then the second year in Alaska, we had kind of a pretty bad accident. And fortunately, because I had kind of dragged Crested Butte into it. So as soon as I got back from Alaska, I went to Gina Croft. I just went to the coolest event in the whole wide world. We need to own this now. We need to run this. This is all, but because Crested View was into extreme limits, John Norton was like, okay, we have this tiny little hill. How are we going to make it cool? Well, we have all this really steep terrain, so we're going to market that. And so it suited them that I had done this contest and come home, and they didn't even hesitate. Sandy Santucci, who did a lot of that video work as well, was a good friend of Ginas, and he got involved right away. And we were off and running. We duplicated the judging criteria. And because Crested Butte had so many great skiers and such a passionate group of backcountry and hardcore young go-getters, I mean, in my day in Crested Butte, there was 10 telemark skiers that skied better than all the alpine skiers. I mean, it was a different time. We were skiing on skinny skis back then, really skinny. I just went back and looked at some videos from the US Extremes just to remind myself of who was there. And those skis are so skinny. I don't know how we did it.
So who were some of those first competitors, especially local competitors?
Yeah, I was looking at, it was a lot of the patrol, not a lot of the patrollers. There's definitely a handful of patrollers, guys like Dave Swanwick, Seth Morrison, young Seth Morrison. He was there with his mom. He was so impressive. Kent Kreitler, Scott Kennett, Johnny Biggers, is he still in Crested Butte? He was right there from the beginning, and he, I think, worked on the high angle safety team. So Crested Butte Patrol ended up being the patrol for the World Extreme Skiing Championships, and they became a very tight high angle safety team, and they trained in the Hall of Fame, and these guys they had sponsors, and where were they sponsored by? Gina was just telling me it was this Snow and Rock, which was this British company that Crested Butte had a relationship with, and they got them these Degree 7 outfits, and it was Pete Gibbons and Jack Gibbons. I don't know if those guys live in Crested Butte anymore. Tim Rolfe, Danny Ewert, Frank Coffey. Tim Coughlin was one of the very first people. He came up to Alaska on the second year before, let's see, so that would have been 92. So now Crested Butte has run the first extremes in 92, and then we went up to Alaska, and Tim Coughlin, who was on Crested Butte Ski Patrol, went up with us, and that was when we had this bad accident where this guy broke his femur and smashed himself in the head with his ski boot, and he really was in over his head and should have been doing what he was doing. There was nobody around to save him. And so when Tim got back, he said, all right, this is a real deal up here. It's super dangerous what these guys are doing. It's not Crested Butte. And they got the money. Gina helped them get the money. And we had like this pro patrol that was really a bunch of badasses that went to Alaska and worked with Dave Hamry, and Frank Coffey was a huge part of that. I mean, guys that were mentors big time for me, because what I ended up doing was not always competing, but I would go up and judge and do broadcasting. I worked another angle to keep going to Alaska and not have to compete, because it's a lot of pressure. But anyway, so the first year in Crested Butte was 1992. And that gang was a mix of, I think Doug Coombs came down because he had won the Worlds. Rob Van Arnhem, or the Van Arnhem's still in Crested Butte. Krista Hildebrandt, she sort of came in a little bit later, not in the very beginning. And then, there were so many just young, fun people that were about, the best skiers in Crested Butte. Steve Winter and the Matchstick Productions gang was, they weren't even Matchstick then. They had a different name. Kasha Rigby was one of the first players, and she was a fabulous telemark skier, became a North Face athlete, and she was a tough competitor. Like on tele skis, she was one of the best all-around skiers in the contest in the early 90s.
So they were taking tele gear down that, you're saying?
Yeah, but keep in mind, we're also skiing on skinny skis, okay? So everybody's on skis that are like under 6,500 foot.
Right.
We're skiing on GS race skis So as a tellier, it evens up the playing field quite a bit, because you're still making those hop turns. You're not doing what we do now on big skis. You're smearing and sliding and slashing and dropping and spinning around backwards on fat skis with no, with rocker. It's entirely different sport. But yeah, Crested Butte had so many good telliers.
Yeah. I mean, we were kind of the rebirth of that in many ways.
Yeah. Barb Peters. Does Barb Peters still live in Crested Butte?
That's a name I recognize.
Part of it. Jill Sickles, Matlock was in pretty early. Allison Gannett, Bluestein, Woody Lindenmeyer. He's a part of Crested Butte. He was competing a bunch in the beginning. Paul O'Connor was on the patrol. That was the gang.
So you brought up Seth Morrison, and then you also mentioned Freeskiing. So I'm wondering, did this event really come out of, and correct me if I'm wrong, Freeskiing was kind of starting to take off, right? This was kind of a new development going on in the ski world. Is that correct, or not at all? Had that already been?
No, it was definitely, there was movies, so you were the wildest, best skiers on the mountain, the Steve McKinney's that was jumping off the Palisades and Squaw Valley high on acid in the 60s, and the best skiers who were in Warren Miller movies, and the guys that were pushing the envelope, they were out there.
Okay.
But a lot of the problems were, I think, resorts really weren't opening some of the more dangerous terrain. And so there became more and more pressure. And in this movie, Blizzard of Oz, it's stated, Scott Schmidt says, that we're going to Europe to ski the rad extreme terrain because in America, they won't let us because the lawyers are keeping us from skiing. And at that time, a lot of the terrain that we now ski on a regular basis was closed because it was considered too dangerous. So that movie opened, the door for people to say, yeah, let's ski steeper terrain. Why is it closed? And Crested View was at the forefront of it because they didn't have any other terrain to open. They had to open steep terrain because that's, 80% of the mountain. So why not take advantage of it?
It's a pretty genius thing because now that's kind of Crested View. It's one of their many angles.
Yeah.
The best experiences in the world. Yeah.
So many of the best people for a long time came from Crested Butte, and a lot of people now, I have friends that work at Red Bull and that work for film companies and run big, huge production companies that we all were cutting our teeth in the extreme scene. And a lot of us went from competing to organizing and working in broadcasting or working with sponsors or running events. And it was a mecca. There's a lot going on, a lot of high energy, a lot of smart, enthusiastic people involved in it. So it was really fun.
What a unique period to be a part of Crested Butte's development and the mountain's development.
Yes, definitely. This, Tia Kali Bowl was so controversial. I mean, open, closed, too dangerous, somewhat,
Yeah. So what were some of the challenges that you faced in putting on this extreme skiing championship, which at this point has only existed in Alaska? Is that correct?
Right. Well, so 91, I go up to Alaska with a small group. It's more like a festival. I come home, I tell Gina's like, sounds great, let's do it. And she gets the motors running and sets it up and sets a date and invites starts putting her people out. And I mean, I was on fire when I came home from the Worlds in 91. I couldn't talk about anything else for about 2 months. Literally every single person that saw me, I was just out of my mind. Because it was truly the coolest thing I'd ever done. And Alaska was the most magnificent place I'd ever been. And I couldn't quit. And the other people that were there, all the Doug Coombses who ended up starting businesses there, and Dean Cummings and Koyman. And I mean, even over the years, more and more people came up to be judges and then started heli operations. And there was a huge, strong contingency from Jackson Hole that got involved in heli operations. There was just the energy was limitless, and the terrain was limitless. And we were, when we were first there, it was really crazy because we were flying around in a helicopter going, can you take us up there and there? And nobody had beacons or packs or shovels, and nobody was paying attention to where anybody else was going. And, people died, not in the contest, but, with all of the people that the contests were bringing and the awareness that was being created through this contest. I mean, it basically put Valdez and the Chugach on the map for big mountain heli skiing. And, in the beginning, it was called Extreme. And then when X Games came out, it was the X Games. And it was actually Shane McConkey and Lotzi Merriam, who worked for Crested Butte at the time in marketing. And who else was involved in that? I mean, I was there in the beginning. Steph Prater started the IFSA, which is the International Free Skiers Association. So they got together pretty early and said, okay, we need a body that protects the athletes. And they were, still the IFSA is, the governing body of free skiers. And they've done really a great job with that. All right, I lost my track of thought where I was going.
That's right. Well, so with this being such a dangerous sport, was there any pushback against starting it in Crested Butte?
I don't think so. We started wearing helmets right away. I think helmets were required the first year. That was something I think I came back from Alaska from going, I can't believe we don't have helmets. It's really dangerous. In Alaska, it's a long fall if you mess up. And we had some really bad accidents over the years up there. In Crested Butte, there are a lot of rocks. It's really actually shocking that we all ski without helmets anyway, anywhere. but I don't think so. You know, it was well run, it was well organized. There's an elimination process so that, you know, they only let in so many athletes. And I think I wrote it down. There was the 26 competitors invited to the 1991 Crested Butte US, it wasn't even, it was extreme, US Extreme Skiing Championships. The word freeskiing hadn't come out yet. And it was really the IFSA, Shane McConkey mostly, that hated the word extreme. As soon as the word extreme came cool, he was like, we no longer can use that word. We're free skiers. We're not extreme. So, and he was adamant about it, and he pushed very hard. And Shane was, you know, he was an inspiration and a leader, and he really pushed very hard. So I think probably we went 92, 3, probably by 94, we were like the US Extreme Freeskiing Championships, because Gina didn't want to give up extreme because, you know, that was what she had copyrighted and it was the beginning. Same for me, like when I say I've won the World Extreme Skiing Championships, people are like, wait a minute, that's not what they call it. I'm like, well, that's what they did when I won. So
yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because about a year ago I put together a ski exhibit for the museum and trying to navigate that, what the free skiing versus the extreme and what everything is. So that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, it was extreme in the beginning, and it was extreme because Greg Stump called it extreme, and then the World Extreme Skiing Championships, and then the US Extreme Skiing Championships, and then it started getting cool, and then ESPN started doing, I don't know how far into, it was probably around a couple years later that ESPN started doing X Games. And X originally was extreme, and then it became Gen X, and then it, you know, is whatever it is. But it's free skiing now. And now it's really confusing because the freestyle, free skiing, you know, there's so many different aspects of the sport. It's great. You know, skier cross, I can't believe that sport's in the Olympics.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I love it.
So how long were you involved with that event at Crested View?
You know, I either judged, actually, no, I never judged the US event. It got huge. There were so many kids in that thing. And what was really impressive was the juniors. You know, back in the day, it was the older skiers that were good. But as the sport progressed and these young kids start stepping in, and just that was really fun to see. Now it's totally a kid's sport. There's no old ski patrollers competing in extreme skiing contests. But back when I was doing it, there was a lot of it. I mean, I was 35 when I won the US Extremes and the Worlds. So but I was quite a bit older than a lot of the other athletes there. So probably like 10 years older than most everybody. Right.
Still having fun then.
Yeah, definitely. What was the question?
It was how long you were involved.
Oh, okay. So I stayed in Crested Butte until, I wrote it down, I left in 2004. So I was either competing in the beginning, working TV broadcasting most of the time. I foreran a couple of events and heckled the crowd a couple of times. And mostly I got to be involved with the broadcasting, which was really fun.
So were you doing ESPN for that?
It ended up airing on like ESPN2 at like 2:00 in the morning most of the time. Unfortunately, the productions weren't the best. If you've ever watched some of the old stuff, it's, you know, John Sandy just had his own style, and it really wasn't the greatest edited, you know, and it's a tough sport to shoot well, I have to say. But it was ESPN and ESPN2. I did a bunch of work in broadcasting, which was a blast. And a great way to travel around and not have to train gates.
Right. Is you know, the course of Crested View, is there anything about this particular event that really made it stand out amongst free skiing competitions and extreme competitions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they were the first for a long time. So it was only Alaska and Crested Butte. The next contest that started was in 2004. Martina Diaz she was the South American ambassador at Crested Butte, and she ran the South American Extreme Skiing Championships in Las Lanas, and that was in 2004. And that event ran for 3 or 4 years, but ended up not really. But now they have the whole world tour, and they do go to South America. So really for a long time, it was Crested Butte owned the contest in the States, and only the best of the best got to go to Alaska.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that was
It ended up there were like 200 athletes in a contest. It was massive. And it
I,
was the only contest that was open to everybody. So you could just, anybody could, it was all, you sign up and the first 200 athletes to sign up get in. There's
I
some
love
like
that idea.
yeah, it was great.
You
And
know,
she fought the tour. She didn't want to be a part of the tour because she wanted it to be a grassroots program where anybody could do it. Just if you got in time, you got your money and you signed up in time and you were in. It didn't matter who you were, or what you won, or how many sponsors you had.
so speaking of Gina, I've talked to her a few times trying to get history and things from her because she really was so involved in so much. Anytime I talk to people, they always mention Gina. And when I talked to her last, she told me, "Oh, she wasn't that involved. Oh, I didn't do anything." So to honor her a little bit, I was wondering if you might tell us a little bit about Gina and her role that she had.
Oh man, Gina ruled it all. She basically, ran marketing. Bob Gillen in the beginning taught her a lot, and she learned a lot. She's a very hard worker, and she surrounded herself with great people, smart people. But she was responsible for bringing, creating the U.S. Extreme Skiing Championships, listening to me and saying, "Okay, we're doing it." She pitched X Games winter to X Games before there was X Games winter. And got it to Crested Butte, which was shocking. She got amazing sponsors. She was so generous with me and, traveling around the country and doing different, Crested Butte type promotions, but just always full of ideas. People loved her. People loved working with her. And she was quick on her feet and, just knew how to, take care of people and give them what they wanted and always come up with fresh ideas as how different sponsors could benefit from being a part of Crested Butte, which then funneled money into things like the U.S. Extreme Skiing Championships. She worked really hard, like tirelessly. She worked too hard.
I believe
We
that.
don't laugh about it. Yeah, she didn't really know. She didn't know how to not work hard. She only had one speed.
Well, it certainly was to the benefit of CBMR.
Yes, definitely. There was a lot of really great characters, like really authentic, um, just kind, passionate people that love what they do and love the sport. And um, even the Callaways and the Waltons, they were really nice people. They might have done everything perfectly, but they were having a good time and they wanted what was best for the ski resort. And they're good old boys from the South, on golf resorts, and But Edward Callaway, I got to work with quite a bit. Or he was my main boss when I was there, and I was ski ambassador, and that's who he gave me my job. And he was really a fair and very kind man to me.
Yeah, what was that like? What was the Callaway and the Waltons like?
Just a family. Not the. I think that I can't really tell you the whole business background because I don't remember exactly, but it just wasn't anything like the corporate world that the ski resorts are today.
Mm-hmm.
And even at times there were some sort of inappropriate things that would never fly today that were just so funny. I mean, I think I remember one time Ralph Walton like trying to auction off Stephanie Prater at some event. He just had a few too many, and he tried to praise Stephanie for working so hard, but in doing so he offered her off to the highest bidder in the room or something. It was so bad. And I just think if something like that would happen today, you'd never hear the end of it. Vail would burn the town down.
That's right.
We no longer know you.
Well, we are getting close to the end. So folks, if you have questions for Kim, please do post it in the chat or the Q&A and we'll make sure to ask. So Kim, what's going on now? What are you working on, and where are you going skiing these days?
Oh, I just skied in Colorado. I was in Aspen. I did a 5-day ski. I work for K2 and ski development. So I help design all the women's specific skis at K2. And actually a lot of the skis are the same. So I ski on everything that we make. It's really fun. I did find that it was a little challenging with COVID, so I have pulled the plug on my January, and I'm going to stay in my Mexico home and see what happens with COVID. But just take the month of January to, let things calm down. And it's just so much responsibility, taking care of people and trying to keep everybody safe and make sure they have a great time. And I just felt like I couldn't deliver that product. So I'm working on my kite surfing, and I'm writing a book. So that's very difficult. I'm a terrible writer. I'm a good chatter as long as somebody's directing me. But writing's very difficult for me. So I have to my words, when I start writing them, get lost. My stories get lost. So I have to speak into a speaker and write it. It's just not easy. I'm not a writer. So.
Well, from what you told me before we got started, I'm looking forward to reading that when that comes out. It'll be a lot of fun.
Well, it's kind of like, have you seen a masterclass? Do you know masterclass? It's kind of like a masterclass. It's like the different chapters of my life, and these are the hard lessons that I've learned, and these are the mistakes that I've made, and how it's made me a better person because of them. And if anybody out there can learn from my experiences, then that makes me feel good to be able to share them, and makes me humble at the same time.
So we do have a comment from Glow Cunningham. She says,
Hi, Glow.
Hey, Glow. So great to see you. You look so great. Yes, Rob, Krista, Johnny, Paul, Steve, Murray, plus lots of early telemark skiers. John Cook, too. Tim Rolfe, Craig Hall, Allison over in Paonia. Good to think of Kasha. Gina was a major influence here, and Scott Walton is back here now too, and of course Steph's here as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
Glow.
Thanks, Glow.
Yeah. Well, Kim, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us tonight. Is there anything that we should absolutely know about Crested Butte history or Crested Butte skiing or your experiences that we should go away having heard and learned from?
Oh, no, I think that I would say that if I had had children, I would have stayed in Crested Butte. And I think it's one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I miss the community, and I'm sad that I'm not a part of it, but life doesn't always go the way you plan, so you make changes. And I'm glad that I had it for 15 years. And actually, the house that I bought in Crested Butte, appreciated enough to allow me to get my house here in Baja. So that's my give back, or my flag of appreciation to Crested Butte and everything it's given to me. There are a lot of amazing years being there. Yeah. I wish you the best starting out, just getting going. Well, 10 years you have already. So
yeah. Well, it's always, this town is changing so much these days. Every year I feel like just keeping up with Crested Butte is a whole job in itself, It's
nice so that the town of Crested Butte is separate than the mountain. I mean, as a community, you guys are really able to, dig your claws in and hang on to your beautiful place. And it's a huge benefit and that's what makes Crested Butte really so special. One of the many things.
Yeah, one of the many, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again, Kim.
Happy holidays now. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening, everybody in our audience, and many of you who we've seen every week. Remember, if you'd like to possibly win a trip to Hawaii or win a pair of custom ROM skis or $100 or $500, visit CrestedButteMuseum.com to participate in our holiday history raffle. Thank you again, and everybody have a great rest of your night.
Bye.